Jason Arday was found dead at his home property in Battersea on the 14th of August 2026. Now clearly, this case in itself is an absolute tragedy from absolutely start to finish. But on this channel, what we like to do is we like to investigate cases, we like to look at theories, and we like to gain an understanding of how this person would have gotten from this point to the point of his tragic death on the 14th of August. And so if you're not familiar with the Jason Arday story, I'll cover it right now. So Jason Arday had claimed throughout his young life, because he was young at the time of his death, and so, as a brief example, Jason Arday explained that he was unable to talk until he was 11 years old. He was unable to write or read until he was 18 years old. He claimed that he played professional football for Crystal Palace. He also claimed that he played snooker at a professional level. He claimed that he had ran 30 marathons in 35 days, 9 of which were with a broken leg. He claimed to have run 300 miles in 3 days and 600 miles in 6 days. And then there were instances and circumstances of which he had created for himself, for one, better himself and to progress his career, which ultimately were being investigated and also concluding to be wrongdoings on his behalf. As an example, Jason Arday completed his PhD, yet it was being investigated that almost 200 pages of the PhD was plagiarized and was from another student's work. It's also reported that in terms of the PhD itself, I think I read that it was Liverpool University, well, they will conduct a face-to-face assessment on your completed work. Now, I read that Jason Arday had been in a accident which had caused memory loss, and so he was unable to participate fully in that meeting. So essentially, they were more lenient on him, and this helped him, obviously, to obtain his PhD with, let's say, less scrutiny. There are many of these fabrications that you can read online or what's been reported, investigated, and concluded in relation to Jason Arday. The ones that I've just listed, these are not the complete set. But for the purpose of the background, I wanted to give you a little insight on Jason Arday's life at this point. Now, Jason Arday was said to have had autism, which in fact, I think was one of only a few things that could be certified. So it was that Jason Arday had autism. And so life itself with autism can be really challenging. And regardless of the fabrications and the circumstances of which Jason Arday took advantage to better himself and his career, I think it's fair to say for Jason to reach a PhD level of education, he was quite knowledgeable. And again, when you hear him speak as part of his lectures, well, the knowledge to a certain degree does shine through. But again, we've got to look at in this video his circumstances, the way in which he's elevated to, let's say, a public figure, and then investigated and scrutinized to a level of which ultimately may have caused his death. Now, if I'm looking at this case from a different perspective, because Jason Arday was ultimately, at his point of death, a public figure. He was the youngest and first black professor to work for Cambridge University. And again, Cambridge University is one of the most prestigious, probably top 3 universities, so places of education in the world. So Jason Arday was elevated to the highest of heights. He was on essentially a very tall pedestal. But what he took with him to the top was a set, again, of fabrications, lies, and again, what we've touched on, these circumstances and scenarios of which he had used to his advantage to reach the top ultimately. So what happens when you're at the highest of heights? You're now a public figure with ultimately the public and everybody within the public invested in you and your story. Well, the pressure it creates on would have been Jason Arday would have been tremendous. So how have we gotten then to the 14th of August 2026 and Jason Arday has lost ultimately his life? You've got to look at, I would say, 3 main contributing factors. Of course, let's start with Jason Arday. You can't rule out that to a degree that he has had a detrimental impact on his own life, because ultimately he's fabricated a lot of stories, he's lied about a lot of things, he's to a degree plagiarized himself to the top, and when he got there, he took advantage of everything that he could. And I'm not going to sit here and say that you as a viewer are a perfect person, or me as the content creator, I'm a perfect person as well. I think in life, not to talk philosophical, but you of course will take advantage of every situation that you can to reach the highest of heights. Everybody in life wants to better themselves and ultimately better their life for their family and friends as well. And as much as that is not okay, well, in society and in life, it happens. But what had the most detrimental effect on these lies and fabrications is that Jason Arday was no longer a normal person like you watching this video and me creating it. Again, he was now a public figure. So what got him there? Well, you've got to look at, which brings me on to the second detrimental impact on his life, is society itself. Because society and everything that governs it and that runs society has essentially allowed a person to be in a position and to be a public figure who probably wasn't meant to be. Because but for the fabrications, the lies, the deceit in terms of his education to a degree, because again, I think he was quite clever. But should he have been at the highest of heights at Cambridge University as a professor where the students pay money for his knowledge? Well, looking at it from an outside view, probably not. However, society have now built him up and they've put him there. Despite the background, the lies, the deceitfulness, they've placed him in that position where ultimately he now is a target. And so if he wasn't a public figure and he was just a normal person, while the scrutiny on him, even with all of his lies and deceitfulness, it wouldn't have been so intense. And so society plays, for me, an important factor. So you've got Jason Arday and society. So we'll move on to the last thing, which I think has had detrimental impact on Jason Arday's life. The third and final thing you've got to say is the media itself. And the media, of course, it does form part of society. But for me, the media is what drives absolutely everything in this world. And when I say media, I want to touch on this because It is both the mainstream media, but also small creators and large creators on YouTube, X, and other various social medias. Because ultimately, Jason Arday had lied and been deceitful, and again, painting this picture of the story, had put himself in a position of which he probably really shouldn't have been at. Society, well, they've picked him up and they've helped him. They've pushed him up the ladder, knowingly along the way that investigations had been done and were being done on Jason Arday, knowing that his life had probably been full of these lies. But regardless, society, they've pushed him up that ladder to the very top. And then what happens? This is where the media come in. While they scrutinise, they persecute. He's on the news, the TVs, the radios, Jason Arday, Jason Arday. And now what you have is you have Jason Arday himself sat there taking all of this, essentially what is abuse. You know, everywhere he looks, he's seen his face, he's seen his name, he's seen theories, and to a degree and to a level are things that would have been true and would have been things that he's created for himself and fabricated and lied about himself. So he knows that these things are true. And it's all building on top of him. And I think essentially that's what leads us to the tragic death, because somebody has ultimately lost their life. And as much as I feel he's contributed to that himself, I think society and the media have played an integral part also. So of course, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody that was close to Jason Arday. The way that we handle things in society and in the media can have a detrimental impact. Let me know what you think in the comment section about this case.